Well, welcome everybody. I'm Trevor Williams. If you don't know, I'm with Global Atlanta. We are an international business news service here in Atlanta. We write a lot about the city's connections with the rest of the world. And this is the Reframing Resilience series that you find yourself in right now. This is our 10th in the series. I can't believe it. We're getting into double digits now. We have been doing this since really not too long after the pandemic started last year, and looking at various conversations really focused on industry sectors mainly about how we recover basically from this, and how economic development officials and communities and governments can take advantage of international relationships and continue to engage with the rest of the world even when that model of engagement has changed, and really for the benefit of their communities and countries. And we have a decidedly international focus with this, but also we've covered many different local topics, and it really mined that intersection between the local and the international, which is why we're so excited about being a part of this. The partnership is between Global Atlanta and the Pendleton Group, which really does all the heavy lifting on this. So I'm going to pass y'all over to one of the guy Tesslers on the call. Jorge, why don't you just give us a bit of perspective from the Pendleton Group about what y'all hope to achieve through this?
Thank you, Trevor. Great to see so many familiar faces from across, and also some new ones. So for those of you that we have not met, I'm Jorge Fernandez from the Pendleton Group, and on behalf of both Guy and myself, I want to thank you for spending part of the morning with us. This is, like Trevor was mentioning, we're very excited about this partnership, and this is their 10th resiliency, all on different topics, but all it's all about the connectivities to the sectors that are interested in the region, but has the economic development and also the international angle to the conversations. So for those of you that might not be familiar with the Pendleton Group, we are a group of professionals all in the economic development area, and we work closely mostly with communities and organizations within those communities, but also with companies, and we help them develop and deploy an economic development strategy and connectivity, both Guyanized, then focused specifically with the communities and the companies on the international strategy. But you can find out who's with our team. Probably familiar faces that have joined us, but you can look at us at pendletonatlanta.com. And with that, Trevor, I'll pass it back to you.
Guy, did you want to talk a bit about the format?
Yeah. Just a little bit, and I think that those of you who attended past conversation have heard me say that many times. We're trying to bring back the conversation, not just the presenting of topics and issues, but also having conversation, having a networking value to it and a follow-up, etc. So if you find someone on this call that you do not know and wish to connect with for advancing whatever business agenda you may both have, please reach out to us and we'll make the introductions. And we're trying to create an environment where people can talk. It looks like we're getting to the point that we're pretty much getting closer to where we can actually go back to doing it in some format of real life. But until then, we would love to have this be a roundtable and not just a presentation venue. So feel free to interrupt the conversation, not just with questions to people who spoke before you, but also bring up ideas, comments, etc. And at the end of the conversation, we will send a recording so that you can review it, not just for the content, but also for the people that you would like to meet. And there are also different snippets from the conversations. You'll get a link to that where you can either use that for whatever economic development means from previous conversation. As Trevor mentioned, this is our 10th, and we're trying to make this information and the content that's happening in the conversation beyond even beyond the current conversation.
Yes, and we do have an archive of all these videos as well. So those are all on our website. They're on our YouTube page, but also I think on Pendleton's got them posted, some of the snippets posted, and we've got one hub page where you can see every event that we've done in the past. So you can spend hours and hours and hours reviewing all these conversations. Format wise, we've got featured speakers, right, which is what we call our three guests here, but all of you are equally welcome to speak. We're just going to have them set the table for the conversation. This one, we're focusing on sports. Obviously, Atlanta is a major sports hub, and I really want to ask Dan Corso, who's the president of the Atlanta Sports Council, to give us just a little bit of a baseline here. Obviously, we're an Olympic city, but we're much more than that. We're 25 years beyond that, right? So tell us a bit about the sports ecosystem here, how we go about recruiting major events and what's happening. And then we'll kind of use that as the baseline to launch into a further conversation about the resiliency angle of this and how we've kind of adapted during COVID and what's the future.
Sure. Well, thanks very much, Trevor. Nice to see everybody.
Yeah, you too.
Most folks I know, some that I don't. And for those I don't, it's nice to meet you. And I guess there's a couple of different ways we could take this particular topic, Trevor. Certainly, if you're talking ecosystems within the region and sports, esports is one of those that's just exploding, and one that we at the Metro Atlanta Chamber and Atlanta Sports Council have a focus on. I can tell you this, I am not the best person on this call to speak to that, but we do have, with Grant and Jeremy and Andrew and even Asante, really four good folks who could address that if that topic does come up. But you nailed it. Atlanta has got over the years, just a wonderful reputation of being able to attract and organize and plan large scale sporting events. And cities across America are competing to host and secure these events because it's economically viable for the community. We approach sports much like all of you do, I'm sure, as a pure economic development play. It's not too different than perhaps pursuing a large company to relocate to your community. Sporting events are the same. Processes are pretty similar. The requirements and the needs and the narratives that you have to formulate to convince that entity to choose your community are pretty close to general economic development. So we view it that way. Other cities view sporting events as purely a heads and beds economic tourism kind of play. And I think that's fine too. There is that component of hosting big sporting events, but what we look at are the ones that are high impact, both economically and socially. The trend has been, and we're seeing it now as we pursue the right to host matches for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. The trend has been not how you're necessarily going to execute the event when it's in your city. The trend is how are you going to use the event as you build up for the event year to impact your community socially, both leading up to, executing the year, and then years after the event, the legacy. And so we're excited about that. That's it's somewhat of a new trend over the last couple of years about legacy and social impacts of hosting these big sporting events versus just the pure tourism and the economic value of hosting them, which is significant, particularly on the events that we pursue. We tend to be kind of big game hunters here. It's the World Cups, it's Super Bowls, it's men's Final Fours, and the like. And but needless to say, they fill a void over key periods of the year on the calendar when the hospitality community could use the extra business, and certainly when we look to try to generate tourism value for the entire region and sometimes the state. These big sporting events are great platforms.
Yeah, I wanted to pull out a little bit what you're talking about with the social impacts, right? I just saw that we're hosting the All-Star game coming up, right? In the NBA. Yeah. And they just came out that there's going to be a certain amount of funding that's generated from that. It's going to go to the HBCUs here in Atlanta. And and I saw that in the World Cup itself, the human rights aspect was being valued in terms of the pitch. And so does Atlanta have, you know, at the same time, COVID has come around. We've had all this unrest and, you know, social, racial justice issues, things like that, where some of the sporting venues have stepped up, become, you know, major voting centers, right? And really stepped up their
vaccination
engagement. So like, does Atlanta have a unique story to tell in that regard? Beyond some other places, just given its history with the civil rights movement and things like that?
Yeah, I think to your point, the civil rights heritage that we have here and the strength of our LGBTQ community, those combined, I think, are things that we need to amplify and really put within the narrative of why we would be a good host city or region for these events. Because, you know, it's these events that we pursue and host are global in nature. You know, they're international events. And so, you know, how do we tell our story back to our heritage within civil rights to people who might not be aware of our history there? And so those are the opportunities that we have. And most times the events, the owners of these events allow you those platforms to create certain things, to tell those stories as you lead into the event itself. What's interesting about our work is the events we're talking about are the work we're doing now is impacting, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years from now. We're looking at a bid for this summer for a future men's Final Four that might not, if we're successful, might not happen until 2029, but 8 years from now. So, you know, you've got a lot of time in there that you can begin planning and preparing. But, you know, when you hit that 3 to 4 year mark outside of the event year, that's when you can really start hitting messaging and platforms to really communicate what is it about our community that we want to express to the world.
Yeah. Well, I see Grant, you know, has the stadium behind him. Obviously, that was a big economic development win, but somewhat, you know, somewhat controversial in certain sectors for the public support of it and everything. But, you know, what's indisputable is that it has ushered in Atlanta United, which has been a boon for the city's international reputation, from what I understand. I've been talking to people in Argentina that, you know, will bring up Atlanta United before they bring up anything else, obviously. Right. So tell us about what that has meant, what that team has meant for the city's, you know, just sports reputation around the world, and maybe even for the World Cup bid.
Well, it's certainly a strength, and we all look at our assets as to, okay, what do we have that we really want to tell to FIFA in this particular case. The airport is really probably the top of our list because of the connectivity around the world. Then the venues, as Grant is showing behind him, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which will be a perfect venue for potentially 5 to 6 matches for World Cup if we are successful. And then the passion for the sport within not just the city of Atlanta, but the state of Georgia, Southeast. You know, their fan base is spreading every year. And so we've got that high profile within the sport of soccer because of what Atlanta United have done to kind of create, right, and build that energy around it. So you've got infrastructure, and then you've got community passion for the sport. And one of the things in this particular case with FIFA is they want to know, how are you going to grow the sport of soccer? Although it's, I guess, arguably the most popular sport around the world, but how are we going to continue to feed that popularity and the growth of that sport if we call Atlanta home to our matches? And so with the Atlanta United being based here and everything that they do within the market with, I'm sure, partners on this call, we can tap into that a little bit and continue to drive that.
Yeah. Well, I want to sort of transition to some of our other folks as well, but I wanted to ask you first, Dan, like, you know, obviously the heads and beds argument is not really there right now, right? I think Guy mentioned on the invitation to this call that, you know, there were more cardboard cutouts at the Super Bowl than humans, right? So how have the models changed, or have they? I mean, is it more about biding our time until we can get those people in the seats again, or are there enduring changes to the way sports organizations are thinking about their business model or economic viability that have come out of it?
Yeah, I think we're keeping our eye on how it's always been, you know, on the hope that I think Guy mentioned at the beginning, that it's kind of coming around with vaccinations taking hold now, hopefully, and continuing that momentum. The upcoming NBA All-Star Game is the exception. That is an arrangement between the league and the Hawks and the arena to have that event. It's really more of a made-for-television event for Turner Sports, which is an Atlanta-based organization for the most part. there'll be limited fans.
Yeah.
At the same time, we're planning for the Major League Baseball All-Star Game, which will be held July 13th at Truist Park. And all of our planning thus far with the Braves and Major League Baseball is that it will be 100% capacity. And so while some of the fan events might be a little reduced, and might not be as many private parties or public concert types of festivals, we're planning on a full stadium for the home run derby and the game. And then we'll back off of that according to, what restrictions may be at that time and all that. So we've got plans for 100%, 50%, and 25% capacity. So I'm not sure that answers your question, but you have to be flexible and nimble in this time, as we just kind of ride this wave out.
Yeah, maybe that's a good spot. I don't know if Grant, you want to jump in here, but the way that licensing of content and television rights and all that stuff, has that actually become more important these days, obviously, when you can't have people in the seats and the streaming platforms are proliferating, and everybody, this is sort of a new frontier in terms of digital entertainment. And it seems like we are kind of at the vanguard of that in Atlanta. We've got obviously the film industry really strong here, video game industry is really strong here, but also we've seen the rise of esports. So maybe Grant, let's jump in on that, because I think that's something that not all of us understand, right? And give us a sense for the ecosystem here, since you are VP of Ecosystem Expansion, and as far as I understand, the head of at the chamber and the head of the Atlanta Esports Alliance. So what does that look like in Atlanta, and what's been the progression of getting it to where it is in terms of an actual physical activity, where spectators do come?
Sure. Well, and my background, while it's the United, I mean, you can plop down another 76,000 crazy esports fans in this in the stadium, and it's probably even more exciting, a lot more smoke coming out than what's just behind my head. It's one of those kind of 30-year overnight success stories, and Andrew has lived it his whole life here, and so there are so many people engaged in this who have been nurturing the ecosystem to get it to where it is today, where we can really say that we are one of the, if not the top esports and gaming markets in North America, and that's a bold statement, because we really look at at having to create a 360 ecosystem. So it's not just the number of buildings that you have that are purposely built for something, right? There are other cities that have spent $100 million on an esports stadium that right now can't fill it, and down the road are going to have a hard time filling it. And as a region, we decided we would build this huge capacity for hardware, for software, for the game development themselves, for the funding and financing of it, the legal and accounting aspects, the facilities where it could be done, but attracting the actual teams themselves, the coaches, the owners, the players, looking at major events like DreamHack and MomoCon, Siege, and others that bring game investment investors, people in the business, bring them to a region to really understand not just the industry itself, but what a region can do to help support that. It's what Dan and the Atlanta Sports Council has done in opening up the first, esports alliance, dedicated alliance inside a sports council in North America. It's all these pieces. It's having the world's busiest airport. It's having, the awesome ACVB and the capacity for, heads and beds and butts and seats that we really have in this region. When you get all those folks kind of, rowing in the same direction, it's amazing what you can accomplish. So, your point.
Yeah, I was going to say, just go back a little bit. I mean, I think for me, having reported on this a little bit, I was surprised to understand how much emphasis there is on in-person events in the esports world, like big conventions, that, like you mentioned, DreamHack. And, to me, it seems like, you're internet connected. A lot of these games are internet connected, right? And people are playing all the time online, but also there are these tournaments and major events where people do come together, and they're huge, right? Can you just give us a perspective on that and how that may have shifted? I mean, you kind of mentioned that maybe it'll be hard to fill the stadiums. Do you think that there's going to be more of a retrenchment to to digital versus some of the bigger conventions now?
I don't. Well, digital, I mean, it's always been a global spectator sport online, right?
Right.
That hasn't changed, and I don't think that's going to change. If you think of, tens of millions of people watching something online and 30,000 people in a space, wherever that space is, physically being there, it's a tiny fraction
Right.
of who's actually consuming the content. From a city, from a regional perspective, obviously, Dan and all of us in the kind of in that business, Brandon, and we all want people here, spending money, seeing the city. But for our brands, that content, to your question earlier or comment earlier, Trevor, about IP and being able to monetize in a kind of fanless environment. It's an in-person fanless environment. It's not a fanless environment at all. And the monetization can happen, I would argue, and Andrew can back this up, far more easily than I can. I would argue that the monetization is easier digitally than it is, in person, because you're reaching a massive audience. So yes, of course, we want, when it's safe, we want as many people back in person as we can, but that has not stopped the rain. That has not stopped, phase. That has not stopped all the teams that are here and the content creators that are podcasting, that are streaming, that are, pushing content out there. That's not stopped their revenue flow. It may have altered the path some, but
it's
a speed bump, not a wall.
Yeah, and I think maybe because esports and video games has been natively digital, maybe it might be easier to monetize than certain analog sports that are trying to move into the digital direction. So maybe Andrew, I don't know if you want to say something about this and tell us what the Atlanta Reign is and what game it is playing, in terms of the league and how global it is in nature. I'd just love to get a little bit of perspective on that for us.
Yeah, Jeremy Poore is on from.
Oh, Jeremy, gotcha. Yeah.
You talk more to that. I'll talk more to the college side since we've got our big college.
Oh, got it. Okay, Jeremy. Yes. I don't know if you want to jump in. I don't see you on the screen, but.
Oh, he was here.
Yeah, I am here. Let me turn my camera.
Cool.
All right, I'm underdressed, guys. I'm in a hoodie.
That's all right.
This is how we dress in esports, guys. So, so I work for Atlanta Esports Ventures. We own and operate two premier esports franchises. We own Atlanta Reign of the Overwatch League, where we have 20 teams that compete all over the world. The way the league was structured was around live events. So certainly COVID really affected that. We had 2 live events planned for last year here in Atlanta that unfortunately got canceled. But we shifted everything to online. Yes, it's hurt a little bit because the big thing for us is our live events and really growing a casual fan base. We do a great job reading the hardcore fan, but really for esports to grow, it really is trying to find ways to branch out and grow the casual fans. And once you go to a live event or a gaming conference, etc., and see the communities come together and really support their games and seeing the production value, it really is impressive. We also have Atlanta phase of the Call of Duty League. It's 12 teams that are all over that are internationally as well. Several here in the States, one in Canada, one in Paris, one in London. Same way the league was structured around live events. We actually did an event here in Atlanta right before COVID hit in February. We had a great turnout where we're excited about the future. We just opened a multi-million-dollar state-of-the-art facility here on the Upper West Side off of Collier Road here in Atlanta. If anyone wants to come and check it out, let me know. I'd love to give you a tour to see where our teams are training. Our corporate offices are here as well. But yeah, one thing people misconstrue about COVID and how it's affected people, they want to say esports is booming. There are parts of that are booming. The content creators and the streamers are booming because people are inside their house, so they're consuming more and more content. But us, the teams, are actually struggling a little bit because we really live events. You're starting to see it now with League of Legends. They just announced that they're going to be doing an event in Iceland. They'll be one of the first leagues coming back doing a live event. They'll be doing it in Iceland. Overwatch League has announced that we're looking to do our grand finals event in Hawaii because it's halfway in the middle between the States and our teams that are based in China and Korea. So we'll see how that goes, and we're looking into it. Just the way COVID is going, live event for Call of Duty. So, but we really need live events to come back for us to really keep growing and reach those audiences, because it really is, it's getting together with your best friends. Those fans are your best friends. It's all really, it boils down. The most important thing in esports and gaming is the community. So we need to grow that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for that. That's
thank you,
really
everybody.
helpful. And sorry, Andrew, about confusing y'all too.
I don't mind being confused with Jeremy. That's an honor.
That's good. Well,
Andrew has a lot better hair than I do, so I'm just hair.
Well, Asante, now that we got you, I wanted to bring you in on this too, because, to me, what your role is interesting because you're sort of sitting at the intersection of a lot of these things, right? Like you had your hand in the film sector, in the video game development sector. I mean, I remember, I think my start at Global Atlanta in 2007 kind of was just after you had come to the Department of Economic Development. So we talked a really long time ago. But how do you see the sports and entertainment sectors overlapping? I mean, we all kind of know that they do, but from an economic development perspective, where do you see that happening most of all and being most productive?
Really appreciate this. And good seeing you, Trevor. You're right, man. We go way back, man. So it's excited to be invited to this, offer my little 5 cents of knowledge here. But yeah, so what's really interesting about that, Trevor, is kind of when you talk about the intersection, what's really happened is esports has kind of become that connector. So that's how I actually got involved with a lot of our professional teams, because they were all either setting up their own teams or they all had brand new stadiums. So 2 years ago, we had all these brand new stadiums, right? Everybody, all the teams had one, and they're all looking around. It's almost this real interest. It's almost kind of to me like the film industry was, where we had all these real estate folks going and walking in these warehouses and like, film studio. So it's kind of the same kind of thing. And I think with bringing in the sports side of it, at least for myself, that kind of exposed me to more of the sports side of things. And literally from that, I'm talking to my internal team, is like, why doesn't the state promote sports? Or sports technology, because I think that's where the jobs are, right?
Yeah.
So to me, when you talk about that intersection, esports was that introduction to bring both sports and entertainment together, in my opinion, at least. And now I just feel, and I was listening to Jeremy and some of Andrew as well, and I literally, Trevor, probably since you and me talked, I've been saying, hey man, this all coming my way. Just a matter of time.
Yeah.
And now it's all there. It's all going digital. So in my opinion, at least, I always think technology can get us out of these issues. And I happen to work in an industry where there's a lot of smart people. And if you're coding and people who do development, you're a problem solver. I mean, that's what you do. So I'm you saying all of that to get around that, I'm excited to see how both technology and sports technology I think that we have a shot here at Georgia to not only own that, but to create a lot of jobs in these opportunities, because you're talking about a lot of jobs that probably haven't even been created yet.
Yeah.
So that's kind of to get full circle on this and stop hogging the conversation. That's kind of where our head is on the state level is, hey, we want to work in sports tech as well. And then esports, obviously. But we feel that all of them play together. So we're now creating, we're saying that we're the creative capital industry now, not just saying any specific area, but we want to play in all of those.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting. We had, after the Olympics, obviously there were a lot of sports consultancies that sprung up. So about, that there are quite a few that I've written about going overseas and consulting for other Olympics and things like that, that talked about the physical organization and the sponsorship aspect of those big sporting events and the Olympic Games. But I think it's a new world, right, where technology is changing so rapidly. Licensing is so important. You've got so many different industry sectors, like you said, coming together at the same time. I mean,
one thing,
some of the biggest video games are sports games, right? Like they're built around certain sports leagues, like the NFL and things like that. So,
real interesting thing there. Sorry to cut you earlier.
Okay.
Is what you're seeing on the tech side, like the music industry is the one that's in trouble here, right? Or I don't know, trouble. Again, I'm gonna go back to they need to figure it out, right? And what was really interesting is when you see now the crossbreeding of all of this of entertainment, especially more the gaming technology. So, you know, oh God, I don't know how long it's been, but you had a hip hop artist, Travis Scott, excuse me, did a live performance inside of a video game, Fortnite. So when you're talking about now, these are, to me, these opportunities that's going to play across all of entertainment, because now they're all playing together. And COVID actually helped start that, because now they're using the Unreal game engine. Everybody knows about the Mandalorian, right? They're using game engines to now create the background scenes of movies, man. And that's not going to stop. So that's what I get excited about. I'm like, hey, man, I look at it as an opportunity for us to lead and to be the leaders in these type of industries as they're now being discovered and as they continue to grow.
Yeah. Andrew, I do want to bring you in on that, because you're, you know, with the Georgia Game Developers Association. Obviously, talent is vital, right, in the industry. So how have you seen the talent base grow as the entertainment sector as a whole has grown here in the state?
It's been tremendous, and it's interesting seeing exactly that crossing of the streams that Asante's been discussing. I saw a very interesting graphic earlier today. First of all, everyone has heard the story that League of Legends, their final, had more live viewers than the Super Bowl had. But the AJC ran an interesting graphic this morning showing the biggest companies in the world. And of the top 8 companies, none of them are active in traditional sports, but 7 of the top 8 biggest companies in the world are very active in esports. Google, Amazon with Twitch, Facebook, Tencent, Alibaba, etc. And they are grabbing all this talent just to create that infrastructure. AWS talks constantly, Amazon, their web service talks constantly about how much esports drives people onto their servers and how much they have to structure their server farms to take care of that load for the biggest events in the world. Because when an esport event gets huge, IRES had this experience, they're suddenly adding hundreds of Amazon servers at a time. So for these biggest companies in the world, esports is not only a major part of the business, but a major part of what drives their technology. And they have to hire the best people to create this. We're very fortunate in Georgia that we've got a complete esports ecosystem. We've got some of the best creators of esports games with Hi-Rez and Ubisoft. We've got some of the best broadcasters. Turner's E-League is the best televised esports in the world. Skillshot is one of the best online esports groups. We've got great streamers here, live streamers here in Georgia. We've got the colleges stepping in to a great degree. Georgia State's Pantherland, that we've supported with our Georgia Esports League, is putting on its next event on April 10th. And last year's event, when they had to go all virtual for the first time, was the most watched live streamed college esports event ever up to that point. So we're seeing this growth just happen, and the skills are here. And part of why we're seeing the colleges so interested in it, be it the HBCUs or Georgia State, or even Oglethorpe is in our Georgia Esports League. You don't think of them necessarily as the biggest sports schools, but they know that not only do their students demand an esports experience as part of school, they know that their optimal rising freshmen are esports competitors. They're tech savvy, they're passionate, they usually have better grades than the average, and they're used to working in teams, which is something the colleges say they can't really find anymore. So these become exactly the perfect students for them. And what we're starting to hear from the companies that are hiring these people is that they are the perfect new employees, because they come in with exactly that skill set, which is becoming rarer and rarer in new employees. And the fact that we have schools like not just Georgia Tech and not just Georgia State University, but Kennesaw State and UGA, and even our tech schools have esports team. Wiregrass Technical and Valdosta has competed in our Georgia Esports League a number of times. We're seeing this driving the growth of talent. And it's funny because I've been making games since 1990, but I studied technology. Most people in my generation, I want to be in NASA. I wanted to go to the moon and to Mars. I wanted to craft Perseverance. Now kids are doing it because they want to make games or compete in esports. This is the driver for the technology of tomorrow. Well, technology today, which was what we used to think of as the technology of tomorrow. And we still need that skill base. We still need many more of those people. All of our companies are hiring, and we need more.
Yeah, definitely. I want to
Hey, Andrew, Do you have an idea or perspective of how many universities will have competitive e-league or e-sports teams in say 5, 10 years nationally? What's the reach going to be?
The growth has been significant. At Pantherland last year, we'd gone from about 6 teams to over 20 in the Pantherland event, just between when we were live in 2019 and virtual last year. We're expecting significantly more. These are mostly Georgia schools, but we're getting them from Tennessee and the like. The growth in Georgia, we've had a lot of clubs, like Wiregrass is a club. The number of varsity teams has been a little bit slower on the growth. Really, it's Georgia State, SCAD, and Kennesaw State. But yeah, we definitely expect that to ramp up. There are more than 20 official esports clubs around the state. I really think it's more like 30, but I only have contacts for 20 of them. And a lot of these clubs are about to transition to varsity teams. So that's the beauty of this. The club's already in place and ready to get that official recognition and a higher level of school support.
Do you have any data on how many universities across the country?
It has been changing so fast. NACE had a list, but it grows so quickly. It's a hard one to keep up with. Yeah, it is hundreds at this point. It's gone from that handful to.
My thought is, again, economic development thinking and grant for AEA and others here. You know, if the NCAA actually comes in at some point in time and deems this to be a true D1 competitive sport, then there's the potential of creating a tournament, much like the men's and women's basketball tournament that we could create here in Atlanta and do some type of national tournament that culminates here in Atlanta.
Yeah, definitely. And
Trevor?
Yes.
I got a question, and it's somewhat in intersection of what Andrew was talking about, what Jeremy was talking about. On the global scale, do you see the participation on esports? It's mostly on clubs or professional, backed up by companies? And what's the role of the foreign universities overseas in terms of the sports? That's one. And then the other question is, if Jeremy, you mentioned Korea and China. I was wondering if Japan also is involved in that, and if you could give a quick, I dabble a little bit on esports with the ACBB and Stella from GDEC who's here, and Mary Waters on the esports landscape in China. How's that evolved?
So you want me to take
either
the Asia question, right?
Yeah, one of the Asia questions or the global one in terms of universities versus clubs.
So I'm not sure how the colleges do it internationally, if they're clubs or official teams. They get official support because a lot of those schools do come over to the US, did come over to the US to compete back 2018, 2019. We would see them at the bigger conventions like DreamHack. There'd be international college teams here in Atlanta for that. But what their official designation is, I don't know. And I don't know how that compares to what we have in the US with the NCAA. I know Canada certainly has a similar organizations in place, and NACE has been moving more internationally with its own approach. Jeremy can talk more to the professional teams, because that in China, as you know, South Korea, it is bigger than it is in the US. It's amazing. Japan is certainly active in this space, and it's funny seeing the corporate teams popping up in esports, and seeing some of the esports companies backing baseball teams in Japan. But
that's interesting.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'll just add in real quick. China and Korea, they are the gold standard as far as esports organizations and how they run esports. And the North America model has a lot of work to do to catch up with what they're doing over there. That's why you're seeing the huge brands are spending their dollars more in the Asian market. You're even seeing companies like Nike and Puma, partnering with teams, decorating the athletes and with their apparel. Yeah, but China and Korea and Japan, ton of players coming from Japan as well. And then more there's these League of Legends and Dota. They are the gold standard.
Interesting.
So I want to add something on the international side, or maybe ask or something. First of all, I feel like I'm in an alternate universe, because a lot of this stuff that, although I consider myself kind of in the know, but a lot of this stuff is totally new to me. and the implications are very, very interesting. And for the international angle, what is the economic development international side? We talked about talent in Georgia. We talked about connection and the technology that comes from that. But where is the low-hanging fruit where international connections and relationships will translate for a mutually beneficial economic development?
Well, yeah, and I was going to ask that very question. I was actually thinking about posing it to Grant. I don't know if you want to take it, but in terms of, we've had a lot of international companies coming in the gaming space, like from Iceland and other places. But also, I think might be interesting to hear Brandon's perspective on that from the ACVB side. Maybe start with Brandon. Obviously, more tournaments, more people equals more business, right? But did you have anything you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, and to be honest, this is relatively new to us as well, Guy. I mean, I remember going to a conference a couple years ago where Vegas was talking about how their huge hotels are taking out nightclubs and making them into, these stadiums now, because that's where the business is. So, I'm not sure it's something that we have put a focused effort into yet. And Dan might actually know a little bit more because he's involved in this, but it is something where I know there's a lot of potential, but I don't have a lot of insight into it right now because it is still new to us a little bit as well.
Well, Grant, did you want to talk about the company recruitment side, maybe?
Yeah, sure. Well, and I mean, just look who's on the call today. I mean, all of our amazing international partners. I don't think there's a country represented here today that we're not, already, actively working on. I mean, it could be a friendly with Ajax, right? It could be a trade mission, to Manchester. It could be, heavily involved in working in Tokyo and trying to build kind of our gaming ecosystems together. So I mean, there's a lot of opportunity, I think, when we look at both outbound investment for our companies here, because we can be an exporter of products and talent and services. So we're always looking, of course, for outbound investment to help our companies grow. But I think there's, as much opportunity to bring in, I think Andrew mentioned earlier, Ubisoft's acquisition of, one of our biggest brands here in Georgia. We expect to see more of that. So being able to have an international relationship with our consulates and, with our trade officers, with our bilateral chambers, that's really where we figure out how we leverage it, because it has to be a two-way street, right? It can't be because, the folks in Montreal or the folks in, in Tokyo or, in Singapore, everybody has a sales proposition. They're talking about what's great about their ecosystem and how they're growing. And so we've got to find a way, to continue these partnerships. That can be universities, right? Doesn't have to be just in the for-profit world. There's a lot of incredible internships that companies have that can be done virtually right now. And Andrew mentioned, Siege and MomoCon and DreamHack. We're seeing more and more international interaction, particularly from our local consulates and consuls general.
Well, that's a good segue because we've got Andrew Staunton from the UK Consul General here. Andrew, I think he has his hand up. You want to say something?
Hi, thank you very much, Trevor, and thanks, Grant and Jorge, for organising this. Fascinating stuff. I mean, apart from the fact I'm a bit of a sportaholic, so I always love listening to any discussion about sport. Just to say that the UK government, through our Department of International Trade, we are running at the moment a prosperity project, looking at the opportunities for transatlantic cooperation in the field of sports and entertainment. I think some of the people in this call and others are going to join us next week for a focus group so that we can look at that. Yes, it's about that sporting side of it, but it's also about the sporting business ecosystem that surrounds it, where, the United Kingdom is the leader in some aspect of esports. We're learning all the time from what the US is doing as well. So I think the sport for the passion and the spectacle, also the sport for the economic development aspect. And, Atlanta has so many powerful sports. But I also think one of the things that's very apparent to us is that underpinning what I would call amateur sport in the US, you know, the college system, you know, with crowds of 100,000, what is their experience? Can we bring that technological development that we're seeing in the US to the United Kingdom and vice versa? So really excited about this, and we're giving it a little bit of research thought at this moment because it's such a big sector, as we've just heard this morning, that we're trying to establish where are the niche areas we can add value.
Yeah, and thanks, Andrew. I wanted to also just ask, we've got.
I think you're on mute, Trevor.
Oh, no. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay,
Very
good.
quickly, you were asking about the low-hanging fruit. I did want to say one thing that we're finding ourselves doing more and more of is connecting international products with live streamers who can present that. We just helped a German sports protein powder drink company connect to Atlanta streamers to do a test run of this market because they're looking to come into the US. Very low cost compared to what they usually do. Very easy to target their market and very quick to set up for them. So utter low-hanging fruit. It's how do you promote to new markets, and you can do that with American products going international.
Yeah, that's an interesting point about how these things, you know, intersect again. Like we obviously are a big fintech hub here in Atlanta, and I remember talking with one of the online gaming companies about how they actually do the processing of the in-game purchases, right, for the virtual goods that people are buying to, you know, improve their armor or their power or whatever it is that they're doing within the game. And the processing challenges of that are actually really interesting because you have people playing from Brazil at the same time people playing from Russia and China, right? So how do you handle currency exchange, and how do you process those kinds of payments? So there's all kinds of intersections like that. I wanted, since we got about 10 minutes left, I wanted to bring in Andrew. Did you want to say something else? Thought I saw you raising your hand. No, okay. We have other government or consular representatives on the call. I saw Ash here and Kenji from the Consulate General of Japan. I just didn't know if y'all wanted to talk about just what your countries are looking at, and maybe even Sergio, if you wanted to talk about what Georgia's doing to promote this sector in the European market. I thought that might be interesting too. So whoever wants to jump in on that, thought we could.
Hey, Trevor, it's Ash.
Yeah, sure.
So it has become a growing phenomenon, especially on the Canadian business side. We have an entire team within the consulate that just does trade matters, as you will know, and that particular sector, that file, was probably growing more, and this is just esports, growing more than any other thing they were touching, other than maybe automotive. There are several Canadian gaming companies that are very well known in gaming circles. You know, when I joined the call earlier, you had joked about my setup. Well, it's a hobby of mine. Streaming and the lighting and the boom mic, the studio mic here. It's what I do in my downtime.
Awesome.
It will not replace my day job anytime soon, but it's something that I'm keenly interested in personally. So it is definitely something that the Canadian government and the Canadian Trade Commission keeps an eye on. Epic Games, based out of Cary, North Carolina, just did a huge expansion into Canada and inside Montreal. We've got BioWare just in Edmonton. It's another huge gaming company. And I wanted to mention, just to Dan's point earlier about the collegiate side of things. Now, granted, this company is in California, and I think we need to beef up and have something equivalent for some of our Georgia native companies, gaming companies. But Activision Blizzard out of Irvine, California, has a collegiate championship tournament that they hold annually, and it's all virtual. It's going on right now, actually, and it's just for one game. And just looking at that site, there's 13 pages of 20 collegiate teams each per page that are eligible in this tournament. Wow. So that's just a sample for one game, for one gaming company, of what the NCAA could tap into if they ever choose to do so. So I just wanted to throw that out. I looked it up real quick while Dan was speaking because I knew that this was happening. I just didn't know what's happening now. So yeah, awesome. It's a fascinating market. I can't wait to see where it goes.
Yeah, I don't know if any of our other consular folks want to speak, or Sergio, did you have anything to add?
Yes, Trevor, this is Sergio in the Georgia Europe office. We have somebody on staff who is working solely to identify opportunities in digital entertainment and esports. Our colleague here, Ellen Kraft, I don't think there is a week that goes by where she's not in contact with Asante. But we are identifying partners, ecosystems, and target companies here and getting the message out. We are very proactive in raising awareness as to what's happening, not only in the digital entertainment space, but also in fintech and cybersecurity. So to your point, we're proactive and we're pursuing these opportunities here across Europe.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know we've got Julie Lambot on the call, who's from the French American Chamber. We had actually during the France Atlanta series last year, we had an event on gaming and film and with regard to Atlanta and France, and that was fascinating. You know, for me, it was a major learning experience. We talked about Ubisoft, and I know France is very active. I wanted to see if Julie had anything to say, and then also someone reminded me that Antonio from the Brazilian consulate's on the call, and Antonio's been really active in terms of the fintech sector and other trade sectors with regard to Brazil. So maybe start with Julie, if you want to go ahead. I don't know if you have anything to say, and then I'll ask Antonio if he has anything.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Trevor. Thank you for this great event, this great discussion. Indeed, we had that event for France Atlanta, and this was just the beginning for France to realize what the potential of the Atlanta gaming and all the creative industries ecosystem is. So we will continue to spread the word about the potential and what we can do in Atlanta with French companies. And I'm here to help raise the awareness in France and with international companies. So please reach out to me to see how we can help with France. And just to let you know, and I know that Cesar, I see he's on the call, and John Woodward was there as well. We just applied to get the La French Tech labelization, and being involved with all those creative industries and the gaming companies, and that would make sense with La French Tech. Yeah. So this is something we want to continue to work on, and yes, definitely. And just to mention another event that we will have with the French chambers in the US, in September, we will have a 2 days event, and we will work with other chapters of the French American Chamber. And the theme we have from the Atlanta chapter is the gaming and sport. So that's why I'm here today. To make a lot of connections and to see if any of you would be interested in explaining why Atlanta should be on the top of the list of all those French companies when they think about investing or starting a company in the US. So
great. Yeah, and we know France has some major innovators in that regard. I'm going to take my privilege and ask one last question. Actually, Sergio had one for Dan, and I'm going to lump it into my question as well. But Sergio was asking on the chat, you know, what role Coca-Cola plays in bringing the FIFA World Cup to Atlanta, considering it's one of the perennial major sponsors of the World Cup. I don't know if you have anything you can say in that regard.
Well, I think that's another one of those subtle blessings that we have here in the region, and that we have so many Fortune 500 and global companies that, in the case of Coke, do invest in traditional sporting events and sports. And I can tell you this without telling you this, we have certainly tapped into Coca-Cola and the fact that they are a global sponsor and partner of FIFA. Tapped to them, Sergio, at the highest level at Coke to just remind them of how great it would be to have the event that they're sponsoring in their hometown in a very subtle way. But beyond that, we also have potential activation plans that Coke could get involved in our buildup and the hosting of the World Cup here, that they could involve locally and perhaps even statewide. So Great question. Yeah, we look to try to find those companies that are engaged in the events that we're pursuing, and where appropriate, try to involve them in the process.
Jorge, did you?
No, I mean, this has been fascinating. It's a great give and take. And Dan, this is a great audience in terms of having so many consulates in the foreign community of the region as you engage, particularly with FIFA and some of the other events that we're talking about. The same thing to you, Grant and Ash. Great. I really appreciate bringing up with that college in California. I mean, with this league in California on the game, and maybe it's a good things that perhaps we from the region can engage some of these markets to do.
One thing that I didn't think came up, and I think Dan could talk to this too very clearly, is on the hospitality side, youth sports has really been keeping us alive. You know, we had this big cheerleading competition a few weeks ago that 30,000 people came in for. We had volleyball coming up, and you know, a lot of conventions are canceling left and right, but youth sports has been consistent and steady and keeping the business going in the city. So that's a whole different topic, but I thought it was important since this is a sports roundtable.
Yeah, good point.
Good point.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point to bring up too, because not every, I mean, we don't have too many communities represented here that are, you know, outside of Atlanta, but generally in these conversations we do, and you know, it's not something that not every city can be a big game hunter like Atlanta, right? Like, so there probably principles that can be, you know, gleaned from the recruitment process that other communities that are smaller and may have different assets can take advantage of, even if have the infrastructure that we do in Atlanta.
To Brandon's point, those are just as valuable, perhaps sometimes more valuable, to host a youth event, because it brings, you know, mom, dad, grandma, and sister and brother along with the participant, and they spend multiple days here spending their money in the hotels and the restaurants and shopping. So there's a great tax generation, and sometimes the cost to host those events are much lower than a larger scale event. So your margins are much better on the economic impact. So it's a good point, Brandon.
Yeah, for sure.
Can I jump in on the same point, actually?
Sure.
Yes, good. Sorry, I joined you a little bit late. My name is Troy Richards. I'm in Atlanta at the moment, but originally from Jamaica, but lived in England for most of my life. And on the point of youth sports, I'm a former runner for Jamaica and 92 Olympics team. And it's only when I went to England, I discovered that I run at a track meet. It is the third oldest track meet in the world. It's called ESA Boys and Girls Championship, that started by a group of English boys back in 1901 in Jamaica. And it's a well-known, that's where the likes of the Usain Bolt, Shelley and Fraser and so forth, it developed those athletes. That's where they were first known. And, you know, I was trying to actually host this event in London last year, but because of COVID, we had to cancel or postpone it until future. But the whole concept of having events for youth, it is so imperative at this point, because we talk about mental health amongst young people. We talk about the lack of engagement. We talk about youth crime, all these other things. I believe if we were to put more events on, whether it be in Atlanta, whether it be in London, put events on for youth where they can engage with each other. From Atlanta, from London, from Jamaica, that would be a massive impact for youth in general, wherever they are. So, you know, I encourage that sort of initiative. I mean, we're trying to bring it effectively. If you think of the Pens Relay in Pennsylvania, it's the same sort of event, but it won't just be relays. It will be individual sports as well. And, but my plan is to host that next event in Atlanta next year, in London for 2023. But I know it's a huge event. It attracts 100,000 people every year in Jamaica.
Well, and we have had some youth soccer teams from around the world, like from Nigeria and other places, come through Atlanta and do training in DeKalb County and things like that. So there's a ton of opportunity there. I think that's a great point to bring up. We had so one question just about venues, and we kind of talked about this earlier, but Daniel was asking, is the momentum stalled for esports venues after lockdowns of the last year, and is that concerning for the future for esports? Maybe we can leave it. We can have someone address that and leave it there. Andrew, did you want to just take that live, and then we'll close it out?
Sure. So I also serve on the board of the Economic Development Authority for DeKalb County. And I know this is true for us and others, but a lot of the developers who are talking to us are looking for ways to incorporate esports into what they're doing. And yeah, while it did hurt some of the, COVID definitely hurt some of the smaller venues, we're seeing more and more developers talking about wanting to make it either a cornerstone of what they're doing or an important part of what they're going to develop moving forward. World Congress Center has obviously done a great job with MomoCon and DreamHack in the past. So we definitely have the biggest places, the place that can handle the biggest events. It's those mid-sized that are more of a question. And we use for Pantherland the old Brave Stadium that Georgia State University owns. So there are options that you wouldn't necessarily think of around here. And I know that Comcast is interested in incorporating this into their facilities and so forth. So, and just talk to Jeremy about his. Skillshot has theirs. There are good, smaller, strong places. It's that mid-size we need to see come into existence here.
Yeah, I'll just add in real quick that there's a ton of esports venues that are being discussed. There's one that was just announced for Toronto for Overactive Media. They're going to be building one. Philadelphia's building one, and I think it might be on pause due to COVID. They have to be multi-use. I mean, venues, the big venues, just being strictly for esports, it has to be multi-use for other events and parties and conferences that could come in there and use it, because if it's just esports, it's gonna have a hard time.
Yeah.
And one thing you don't realize too is, and I realized this, that we were looking for venues around Atlanta to do our events. A lot of the venues that are built right now are not compatible with esports, just due to the tech and the productions that go into these events and security that's needed. That's why you're seeing more and more venues that are being built or being rebuilt, so to speak, to go along and complement esports.
Great. All right, y'all. Well, thank you so much. I really feel like we've covered a lot of ground. Jorge, you want to close?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this is great dialogue about this fascinating topic, which is so integrated to both the international front and the economic development. Stay tuned. We'll send you the recording, but more important is the snippets, because you can use it on social media very easy. And I'm glad that this interaction. Troy, make sure did you see the note from Grant to reach out to him on your initiative, because this is what it's all about. It's kind of bring people together that has a passion for this type of topics, and how we can facilitate that networking, which is all about with a partnership. Again, thank you for joining us, and thank Dan and Grant and Asante and everybody else, Jeremy and so forth, and then the Consular International Community and everybody that is interested for joining.
Yeah, thank y'all. See y'all soon.
Take care.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.